Welcome to Life Unpacked, the weekly podcast designed to help you navigate the everyday with more clarity, purpose, and intention. In each episode, we take the challenges, questions, and experiences that shape our lives and unpack them layer by layer. Through honest conversations and elevated perspectives, we explore practical insights that can help you grow, think differently, and create a better, more fulfilling life. Whether you're looking for direction, inspiration, or simply a moment to pause and reflect, Life Unpacked is your space to reset and rise. Together, we'll dig deep, open up new ways of seeing the world, and empower you to live each day with more confidence, balance, and meaning. Have you ever felt like your faith was running on empty? Like no matter how much you pray or study, the engine just won't turn over? Most of us assume the problem is a lack of belief. But what if the problem is actually a lack of love? Today, we're unpacking a concept that might be the missing link in your spiritual life. The idea that faith is energized by love. We're going to look at why hidden grudges act like a lock on your potential and why loving your neighbor isn't just a nice suggestion. It's the actual fuel for your faith. From breaking the habit of gossip to practicing absolute integrity in the small things, we're moving from a faith that's stuck to a faith that works. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening up a really deep and, I think, challenging theological discussion.
We are.
And we're drawing from a single powerful source, a sermon delivered back in May of 2015 at Life International Church in Durban, South Africa.
That's right. And our mission here is to really dissect what was part of an ongoing teaching series.
A series focused on what the source argues is the absolute foundational role of love in the Christian faith.
It's a remarkable dive because the core thesis is, well, it's uncompromising.
Which is?
That faith only works through love. Not that it's a good idea or a nice add-on, but that it's the operating principle, rooted right in Galatians 5:6.
So the goal is to explain why so many people feel like their faith is, futile or just not effective.
Exactly. And the answer, according to this teaching, has nothing to do with a lack of belief. It has to do with a lack of love.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism, because the preacher doesn't use passive language here. They bring up a technical term, energio.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about the process?
Well, it tells us that faith isn't some static belief. It's a dynamic, active force. The term energio is actually where we get our word energy from.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it implies that faith is literally energized. It's made effective only when it's channeled through love.
So it's like a car engine. Faith is the machinery.
But love is the fuel line and the transmission. If that fuel line is clogged, if love is absent, the engine of faith just, it stalks.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how powerful the engine is.
So if love is the indispensable engine oil, this teaching must get really surgical about defining what love actually is.
It does. And that leads us right to the big challenge the sermon sets up.
Which is taking that second great commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, and just completely dismantling how it's usually interpreted.
Precisely. We're about to dive into why that conventional wisdom, the whole you must learn to love yourself first idea, is, in the view of the sermon, logically flawed.
And actually counterproductive.
Exactly. And then we're going to use the original source Jesus was quoting, Leviticus chapter 19, to see what that phrase, as yourself, actually means in practice.
Okay, let's start with the scope. Who is this neighbor we're commanded to love? The sermon immediately broadens this, referencing 1 John.
It makes the definition of brother exceptionally broad. It's not just your blood family or even just people in your church. It's your countryman, your colleague, really anyone you interact with in your community. And the point from 1 John is that love for God and love for this visible brother are inseparable.
A kind of litmus test,
Yeah.
if you fail the visible test.
Your claim of loving an invisible God is impossible.
And to prevent any kind of theological wriggle room, the sermon also tackles the different types of love we always hear about, like agape versus phileo.
It's fascinating because the preacher just actively shuts down that potential loophole.
What do you mean by loophole?
Well, you know how some people argue that they can maintain agape, that unconditional divine love for God, but they only really need phileo or brotherly love for their neighbor?
Yeah, it's a common distinction.
The sermon insists on consistency. The word for love used in Galatians, where faith works through love, and in 1 John about loving your brother, it's the same root. The standard isn't different.
So you can't use a different scale to measure your love for your neighbor than your commitment to God.
You can't. Which forces us right back to Matthew 22 and that second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself.
And the massive theological weight it carries. which the sermon says we mostly get wrong.
It's true. The common interpretation is that the commandment has a prerequisite. You must first achieve a healthy self-love and then use that to love others.
But hold on, isn't that prerequisite important? I mean, in terms of modern mental health, self-care and self-love are seen as vital. Why is the sermon so quick to dismiss it?
That's where the structural and logical argument comes in. Structurally, the preacher just asks a simple question.
Which is?
If self-love were a required foundation, wouldn't Jesus have made it the third great commandment? You know, love God, then love yourself, then love your neighbor.
Ah, okay. The fact that it's just the first and the second implies something.
It implies that love of self is assumed, not commanded. But then you get to the logic of it.
This is where it gets really interesting. The hate paradox.
Yes, and this paradox is it's devastating to the common interpretation.
Break it down for us.
Okay, so if the command actually requires you to love yourself first, what happens to the person who genuinely struggles with self-hatred?
Right. Someone who mistreats themselves, neglects their own needs.
Exactly. If that person then follows the command to love their neighbor as themselves, what does the command logically require them to do?
It would require them to hate and mistreat their neighbor.
Which completely defeats the purpose of the command. It turns a rule of benevolence into a rule of malice, all based on your personal psychology.
So the conclusion is inescapable. As yourself isn't about valuing yourself first.
It's about using the standard of how you already treat yourself, that inherent baseline instinct for self-preservation that we all have, as the universal metric for how you treat everyone else.
So it's not about how highly we think of ourselves. It's about the fact that we instinctively avoid harming ourselves.
Exactly. The law just says, take that natural instinct and apply it to others.
And to see what that application looks like, we have to go to the source, right? To the checklist in Leviticus 19.
Yes. It's the mirror that shows us what behaviors we naturally avoid for ourselves and therefore what we must avoid for others.
Let's get practical then. Verses 9 and 10 talk about the harvest. Don't reap the corners of your field completely.
Right. Don't glean every last grape. And this isn't just, a nice suggestion for charity. It's baked into the law.
It's mandating you set aside your own maximum self-interest.
You have to willingly leave profit on the table. You build concern for the poor and the stranger directly into your business model.
And this integrity extends to money. In verses 11 and 13, you'd never steal from yourself or lie to yourself. But the preacher really focuses on withholding wages overnight.
Think about it. You would never intentionally hold back your own paycheck when you know you have bills due the next morning. It's a violation of self-preservation.
So you must not do it to your neighbor.
And the sermon points out this is one of the most common ways people fail the love test. Small acts of financial negligence that cause real immediate harm to someone else.
Then we get to one of the most profound examples in the whole sermon, the stumbling block in verse 14.
It's so visual.
Yeah, why would you curse the deaf or put an obstacle before the blind? It seems so obviously pointless and cruel.
Physically, it's absurd. No sane person intentionally walks straight into a chair. You move it out of your way.
Of course.
But the powerful revelation the preacher illustrates is that often, out of simple, unthinking self-interest, not malice, we move an obstacle out of our path, and in doing so, we move it into the potential path of someone else.
I shift the burden.
We do. We solve our problem by creating a potential problem for our neighbor. Just think about that in modern terms. Shifting blame, hiding an error.
Prioritizing our own convenience.
And that simple act of self-preservation, even with no conscious ill will, removes love from the equation. It's a failure of the command.
That is devastating, isn't it? Just looking out for, number one, shifting that chair out of my way can be a failure of love.
And that standard has to apply equally in judgment, too, which is verse 15. No partiality to the poor or the powerful. Love is given equally, regardless of status.
This brings us to what the source calls the true inhibitors of faith. The love killers.
Yes, gossip and grudges. The sermon zeroes in on these two as direct reasons why someone's faith might feel futile or just not working.
Let's start with the talebearer, the biblical word for a gossip in Leviticus 19.16. The logic is the same.
You never gossip about yourself or say bad things about yourself, so you must never do it to a neighbor.
And the sermon explicitly calls gossip evil. It slams that classic justification. I'm only telling you because I care.
The preacher insists that if you truly cared, you would go talk to the person involved. Or you'd keep silent and pray for them. You wouldn't broadcast their struggles to everyone else.
And the advice given is radical. Stop talking about somebody else, full stop. And if someone starts gossiping to you...
You're commanded to shut it down. Use strong language.
Okay, but hold on. Isn't telling someone to shut up or be quiet a lack of love in itself? How does the sermon square that?
It's an aggressive act of protection. The sermon argues that even passively listening to gossip is supporting evil.
So the greater love is?
To terminate the conversation immediately, you protect the person who is absent. Rather than being polite to the person who is speaking evil, you prioritize the health of the community over your own comfort.
That really raises the stakes. And it warns that even talking about someone with what you think are good intentions can backfire.
Totally. It can still be heard as negative or cause unintended harm. Total vigilance of speech is the only defense if you want your faith to work.
And finally, we move inward to hatred and grudges in verses 17 and 18. You shall not hate your brother in your heart.
This is the hidden trap. It's all internal. You can smile, hug the whole world, be friendly on the outside.
But if you're harboring resentment or hatred inside,
God sees it. And your faith is still not working. Your external actions are not enough if that internal hostility is still there.
and grudges. The command is, do not take vengeance or bear any grudge. A lot of people say, forgive but never forget. How does the sermon handle that?
It rejects that if never forgetting means you're still holding on to the grudge. Using that memory to justify mistrust or hostility is bearing a grudge.
So a grudge, no matter how small,
It's a block. It stops the mechanism of love. The sermon insists you have to actively dismantle the walls you built around that hurt if you want your faith to be energized.
this entire deep dive has been just a powerful study in practical theology. The sermon's argument is that the Christian life is a walk of love, and if the basics in Leviticus 19 are ignored,
Even the small stuff, like moving a chair.
the greater spiritual efforts are just rendered futile.
It connects high-level theology to the utterly mundane. The source gives you a tangible checklist for every single day, and it forces you to ask, is my frustration with my spiritual life actually coming from my failure to manage my tongue or my finances or my self-interest toward my neighbor?
It makes us reflect on those things we dismiss as minor. We focus on big concepts, but maybe the effectiveness of our walk really rests on not shifting a problem into someone else's path.
Absolutely. It reframes the whole discussion. The problem might not be the strength of your belief. It could be the weakness of your application of love.
And as a final provocative thought to leave you with, the preacher in Durban said that loving your enemy is the easiest one to love.
Because you only see enemies once in a while.
Exactly. So if loving our constant neighbors, our colleagues, our community, the people we see every single day, if that's the real hard part, what fundamental shifts must we make to ensure our faith is truly energized through love? We hope this deep dive gave you something substantial to chew on. Until next time.
It's not about waiting until you're perfect to start loving others. It's about taking that natural care you already have for your own well-being and turning it outward right now. Before you go about your day, remember, if you want to see the power of your faith return, start by showing no partiality and choosing integrity over vengeance. When you love your neighbor, you aren't just doing them a favor. You're unlocking the very best version of your own faith. Thanks for listening to Life Unpacked. We'll see you next time as we continue to unpack life by the unfolding of God's Word. Now, go out there and put your faith to work.